Today we have some really interesting news. Reddit user Violet the 8th dropped some pretty hot info on Reddit this morning, which has been the conversation of the day since. But what happened? Apparently, the Brazilian client got some info a little bit too early. A lot of the item changes that are actually planned for the mid-season patch have already been done on the Brazilian client, or at least the item descriptions have been changed accordingly. Some of these changes were hinted at in previous data minings, so we can be pretty sure that they're legit. And Violet also posted screenshots with the Portuguese versions of the item descriptions. But it didn't end there. Hi-Rez pretty much confirmed that part of these are correct, while other parts are incorrect. After some uproar on Twitter, especially from some pros, about some of these changes, which were really heavy and really questionable partly, there was a response from Hi-Rez Ajax, who posted, "Time to start spoiling, we are planning some big changes to relics and relic upgrades in 4.13. But many leaked items gods are not correct." Note that it says many, not all. And in further responses he says, "Just like any data mining, some parts are right, some are close, some are way off. We are still testing and fine-tuning the patch now." Also, honestly, the ones we're seeing complaints about today are already changed, so I feel good about the final result. Putting one and one together here, the more ridiculous changes in these relics probably didn't make it through, the more light-handed changes probably have a decent chance of going through, and a lot of the changes, even if they don't come true in the way that they are shown here, may have some essential info on how Hi-Rez intends to approach relics in the next split or in the mid-season patch in general, so I think it's definitely worth looking at them. Violet also made the effort of translating all the descriptions available, so I will link the thread down below, but I'll also go through them here. The first change is Aegis Amulet. The base version seems to stay the same, but the upgrade version receives a change. In addition to the normal damage immunity and being able to move and cleansing slows and roots, you also get a 20% damage mitigation for 2 seconds after using Aegis, which the immobile version used to have at some point. There's a downside to compensate for that. Instead of going down to 130 seconds cooldown, Aegis Amulet now stays at 160 seconds cooldown across all ranks. Belt of Frenzy and the upgraded versions did not receive any changes at all. Blink Rune only got a change on its upgraded version. In addition to the effects that it has right now, you will also get 10% damage mitigation for 2 seconds after blinking. This seems rather strange to me, especially because the item can be built on certain supports as well, but I guess it's to make blink a little less punishing. In return, the upgraded version has 10 seconds more cooldown than before, now 100 seconds. Bracer of Undoing and its upgrade version both receive various changes to put it in a bit of a different spot. The normal version does now restore 60% health and mana lost within 5 seconds on a 120 second cooldown, but no longer reduces your own cooldowns. The upgrade version does exactly that. You get all the benefits from the default version, and you also get 3 seconds subtracted from your abilities currently on cooldown. And that's it. There is no cooldown reduction for the item itself or anything like that. Literally, it's just a 3 seconds reduction, making this a lot more niche, whereas beforehand, this allowed you to use the item aggressive quite often as well. Cursed Ankh remains the same. The upgrade version gets a lot of strange changes. I do not see these going through so far. The changes here are that the healing reduction is now the same as the normal version with 50% healing reduction for 10 seconds. And the cooldown now stays on 120 seconds. But the additional effects are what's so odd about this. Enemies affected by Cursed Ankh receive an additional mana cost of 2 mana plus 2 per level, and their cooldowns are increased by 2 seconds. I don't think this will actually make it through. Just depending on the situation really, in a team fight, adding mana cost to everyone on the battlefield, including those characters which don't really build into too much mana, can lead to some very awkward fighting situations for the enemy team, where they basically have to back off just because of a Cursed Ankh. And I cannot imagine that going through, because it's just such a weird interaction, and it's something that I would put on an anti-mage than a relic, and I think that's probably what will happen. I don't think this is actually gonna be in the game in this way, especially on an item that's designed for anti-heal. The next one is Hand of the Gods and its upgrade. No changes there so far, but I would not be surprised to see changes for that later down the road. Heavenly Wings kind of returns to its old state from when it was Sprint. in its upgrade version. The normal version only cleanses slows, but the upgrade version, now at 140 seconds cooldown, will remove slows, but also make you immune to slows, and immune to the base attack movement penalty still. So this is gonna be a lot more interesting, gives the item back a lot of value, and pushes certain guards back out of the meta. I would not be surprised to see this change go through simply because Sprint has been completely underboard for a while. But then again, in this state it may also be a little drastic, so we'll see how it develops. The long cooldown kinda makes up for the little. Looking at Horrific Emblem and its upgrade, we have some crazy stuff going on. Horrific Emblem itself is not changed, but the upgrade now is on a 120 second cooldown. Maybe Horrific Emblem itself will also be on 120 seconds instead of 130. The main point is that one little thing in the description was changed, but it has a major impact. On top of the 40% movement and 25% attack speed reduction, there is also a 25% damage reduction on this item for the duration of the item, which is 5 seconds. 25% damage reduction in a team fight is pretty damn ridiculous, and I highly doubt this will make it through. Why? Because if you put it on Osiris, you start with 25% damage reduction plus the slow, then you can put Judgment Tether on the enemy. They have a very hard time getting away from you because they're already slowed from the item, and you can stack even more damage reduction up to 50% on top of that. That means you can get 75 damage reduction before even considering that he also has a passive with damage mitigation. That is pretty damn crazy, and I don't think anyone really wants to see that in their games. Except for maybe Osiris mains, so I don't think this change will make it through like this. The next change is also very interesting and probably very unlikely to make it in the game as well. Magical Shell gets a new effect. Gives you and ally guards within 35 units a shield of 100 health plus 15 per guard level for 3 seconds. Cooldown 140 seconds. That means you could, on level 20, instantly pop 400 health onto a target and basically make them negate, for example, any strong ultimate, like Poseidon Kraken or something like that. And that's only the base version. In the upgraded version, with the same cooldown, 140 seconds, you will be getting 2 stacks of block on top of that, absorbing the next 2 basic attacks. If you ever try to deal with an Athena as a melee fighter or as a hunter, you know exactly how frustrating just 1 stack of block can be, or Bellona for that matter. But if you have 2 of them on all characters that proc the shell, that's pretty damn ridiculous, and it would completely counter out certain guards that are dependent on taking on their enemies fast when using basic attacks. Even very fast hitting characters like Kali would suffer a lot from that because they need to burst their enemies with AAs, and I highly doubt that this specific one-sided counter will make it through. It could easily single-handedly push us into a mage meta if multiple players on your team get Magic Shell upgrades. Meditation Cloak remains the same, but its upgrade gets a buff. In addition to the normal effect of 75 healing plus 12 per level and 30% mana to ally guards within 35 units, allies also recover 30% of their maximum health and mana for 10 seconds. In combination, this is a pretty damn strong heal, much stronger than the HP 5 and MP 5 this item gave before in most situations. The sustain this could give a mid-team fight seems a little bit too much to me, and I'm not quite sure if this will actually happen. Phantom Veil is supposed to remain the same while its upgrade doesn't, but it doesn't quite make sense. The effects for the major part stay the same, but oddly enough the crowd control reduction and the knock-up immunity are not mentioned at all. If they are removed on the upgrade, we can assume that they're also removed on the base version, but I don't think that's the case given how little the item has been used overall. What the upgrade version is supposed to do now is to also give you 15% damage mitigation for 5 seconds, and that's for all your teammates as well. The cooldown stayed the same, 130 for the upgrade version and 150 for the non-upgrade version. If you're looking at the next item, it makes a little more sense. Purification Beads upgrade receives a change. In addition to the crowd control immunity for 2 seconds, after the CC immunity, you receive 40% crowd control reduction and immunity to knock-up effects for 2 seconds. So maybe that's why we see this change to Phantom Veil, though it still doesn't make too much sense as, again, Phantom Veil wasn't really picked up too much to begin with, and taking away stats from it should not be the best way to go, so I'm not quite sure what will exactly happen there. Purification Beads will now have 160 seconds cooldown even on the upgraded version. Shield of Thorns receives a nerf and a buff. The nerf is on the normal version, where the cooldown goes up to 160 seconds instead of 120, The upgrade version, however, gets an additional effect. While this relic is active, enemies can only lifesteal you for 50% of their total lifesteal, also on 160 seconds cooldown. This is quite impactful, and apparently it will be renamed to Shield of the Underworld from what I can tell, which would be kind of logical given how it works again now. While I think it's very likely that this change will go through, I highly doubt the next one will. Sundering Spear. Using this relic fires a bolt that travels 70 units, stopping on the first guard hit, and increases their damage taken by 20% for 5 seconds. Cooldown 160 seconds. This in itself is already kind of strange. It completely takes away the damage that Sunder has and just reduces it to the damage increase, while increasing the cooldown quite drastically. 40 seconds is no joke. But it gets a lot stranger if you look at the upgraded version. In addition to having Sundering Spear's effect, this also deals 20% of the current health of the target, not the maximum health, the current health, so you cannot kill someone with it, as true damage. That's pretty damn ridiculous. If you consider how much damage Nemesis already deals with her ultimate, which targets the enemy's current health, and that's not even true damage, you can imagine just how much that will chunk from you. It's literally 1/3 of your health every single time. And I'm willing to bet that this change will not make it through, because this is one of the changes that was mostly debated on Twitter, and Ajax has pointed out that those changes are the ones that won't go through, so I highly doubt Sundering Spear will end up this way. Last but not least, Teleport Glyph gets a nerf. The default version will no longer allow you to teleport to wards. You need to upgrade the item first to get the teleport to wards, and then the cooldown will still remain 200 seconds. This may be a way of trying to enforce less teleport glyph and more consideration for Swiftwing and things like that. Or there may be some changes that warrant this in another way. I don't know, for example, a quicker teleport or something like that, but that's not in the description. What we can generally see, regardless of which changes make it through or not, is two tendencies. A lot of damage reduction for some reason, not quite sure where that's coming from. And B, more importantly, cooldowns. Almost all relics receive longer cooldowns on their upgraded versions, or don't even lose any cooldown compared to their normal version anymore. Instead, they get additional effects that make them more useful and generally stronger, but they are on a longer cooldown, so you have to be more wary of when to use them. I think this is an interesting approach, and I don't mind that, though obviously a lot of these items will need some fine-tuning before we see them in the game. With that, thank you guys very much for watching. I hope this was an interesting overview. The source will be linked down below. If you're not subscribed yet, feel free to click the sub button and maybe the bell. It really helps me out. Hope to see you all for the next one tomorrow. Duke Sloth, out.